Alright, welcome back to Fast Gadgets. It's been a while since I've done a video. It's actually been about 3 days. I like to release a video every other day. It does depend on how my scheduling is going. Lately, things have been a little bit busy, so I've been working pretty hard. So I'll probably go back to my working schedule, which was once every 3 days I'll release a video. And thank you to my 510 subscribers. Appreciate it. To me, that's a really big number. I know other YouTubers talk about hundreds of thousands and millions, but I'd rather have 500 subscribers who are enjoying the content than I would a million viewers who don't. So, you know what? I really appreciate it, and it humbles me. So, thank you. But anyway, just to get into it, really quick video here. I wanted to talk about something that I'm finding very interesting. Operating system preferences, and I'm going to touch on a couple of different things. One starts with this article that I was reading about macOS Sierra coming out and being Siri-centric. And since it's Siri-centric, many people have actually found that they dislike macOS Sierra. Now, I guess I can understand to some extent. I haven't bothered with macOS Sierra yet. I'm perfectly happy with El Capitan, but it doesn't take a whole lot to, and I'm not going to say please me completely, because really, you know, there's not any operating system out there that can do it, but El Capitan is good enough for what I use it for. And honestly, I use Linux most of the time anyway, so I'm happy with Linux. But anyway, this article was saying, you know, there are some people out there that want to know with Mac OS, is it now time to switch to Windows 10? And for me, that's pretty big. I mean, I can't imagine somebody wanting to switch, especially if they've used it for a long time, to Windows 10 and think that they're going to like Windows 10 more. It just doesn't. To me, there's no argument there. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you've been a Windows 10 user for a long time, it would be a major switch. So it would be something that's completely new to you. And I find that hard to believe that somebody would do that. It's not that Windows 10 would necessarily be so foreign, but it definitely would be quite the paradigm shift from, you know, Mac OS or whatever, you know, OS 10, whatever they were on before. I think the same goes true when you're going the other way, or, you know, to some extent if you're a Linux user, depending on which desktop environment you're using. So it's hard for me to imagine. But this article goes on to say that if you're really going to do that, you could move your files and folders from OS 10, and you could use a tool like Ninite has, which is a package installer that will let you choose all the different software packages that you want to install at one time and then get the installer, which I've used. I don't know if anybody's used this, but it's completely awesome. It'll basically fine-tune and simplify the process of installing all those applications that you normally use. Let me increase the browser size here. So with one installer, you can choose Chrome, Firefox. They chose Spybot 2 here. You could do, you know, some other antivirus and security if you want, some developer tools, Notepad++, anything that's free or open source, iTunes, 7-Zip, which is open source, Skype if you're interested, Audacity if you wanted to edit, VLC of course, which I would want, runtime environments. What else do we have? Different utilities, TeamViewer, some encrypting tools. So there's so much out there that you can utilize, even Steam if you want to, and get it all bundled into one quick installer, which is really nice. And I think that would make sense to do those kind of things, but I still don't see how it would make somebody want to make the switch. But I'm a very different animal. I have part of my knowledge in OS 10 Mac OS, a larger part of my knowledge in Linux operating systems, and probably an equivalent amount of knowledge in Windows because I was a Windows user for a very long time before I switched to Linux. And I still use Windows. I will build virtual machines on a Windows 10 operating system on the platform as my host OS, if I need to do it for school or whatever. So it all depends, but I'm kind of somewhat knowledgeable of all the operating systems, so I can switch fluidly and easily back and forth. I understand each operating system's limitations, and if I encounter one, I usually can find a way to get past that limitation fairly quickly. Case in point, Mac OS is not very good unless you're willing to pay for a tool or to do some work to make NTFS writable. So, there's some workarounds, and what I usually do is I have a Mac OS formatted drive that I can use on my Mac, and I can copy files to it, and I can plug it into a Linux system which can read and write to it, and then I can easily copy files from there to an NTFS drive if I want to take to a Windows computer. So I use Linux as an intermediary for that, and I find little things like that crop up, and I just find a workaround, and it doesn't bother me. But if you've been a user on one operating system for a very long time, I think it's quite a shift to go to another one. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. There are many people out there that are fed up with the system they've been using, and to some extent, that's what got me to make my move. So I would encourage anybody who's interested to definitely try out a different operating system and don't just stick with the one you're used to. I think that's awesome. What I usually do is have two systems available. So I have an older system and I have a newer one. And case in point, the system I'm on right now is my 11-inch Yoga 2, and it boots into Linux and Windows. So it's, my primary backup system, and I can experiment with both operating systems, Windows 10 and Linux. And it doesn't cost me very much to do that. I bought this as an open box item for a few $100s years back, and it's still doing wonderful. I really like it. So that's how I do my experimentation. So I don't, what do they say, throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I don't just get rid of the current system. I keep it around, and I have a backup. So I can experiment, but I'm not losing my productivity with whatever current system I've been on. So that's something I think about. And I did have some comments about switching operating systems, and I've actually seen quite a few comments, some of which I've actually blocked because of the language. So if you do decide to comment to the videos that I put out, I would appreciate it if you would keep the cursing and swearing down. I try to keep it relatively rated PG. I know that's really boring and everything, but come on, it's the public. I mean, we don't walk down the street and swear at the top of our lungs in front of children and other people. So could you please try and do it on the site as well if you are going to drop a line? Appreciate it. But anyway, there have been several people, one whose comment I did not post, who was livid with Windows, absolutely livid, and hated it and was cursing about it. And then I had another person who was cursing about Mac and how terrible it was, and how really Mac hasn't gotten any better, or actually has become worse and worse and worse ever since the release of Snow Leopard. And now that Snow Leopard's no longer supported, this person wants to go ahead and move to something else, preferably Windows 10. Well, based on what I was reading, I didn't get the impression they were, and they admitted as much, they're not really that knowledgeable, and they're looking for my opinion, and so I gave my opinion in general. But personally, I wasn't going to tell them, yes, Windows 10 is the best operating system for you, because that's not where their experience lies. So they might not like the experience on Windows 10. And if they're going to buy a new system, which is what they were thinking of doing, honestly, yes, you could get a really good system with Windows 10 on it. And a lot of my users will say, well, they can just throw Linux on it. But anybody who says that you can just throw Linux on that particular system is fairly knowledgeable. And I mean you out there, the viewers, because we all know we can just throw Linux on it. We can grab a thumb drive and download an ISO and turn it into a live bootable USB, test it out, see if we like it, and in 10 minutes have installed it, possibly do a dual boot and all that cool stuff. We know how to do that, but then there's the other 70% of the population, and they are not stupid by any means. There is a big difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance simply is the lack of knowledge on how to do something. And I do not assume anybody is stupid. I don't think that's fair. I do assume that many people don't know how to do those things, and that's fair. So when I think about somebody and when they're writing, I'm very careful with my comments. And many times I'll see somebody respond and they'll say something like, well, you should just tell him to go ahead and boot into Linux, and I recommend Arch, or I recommend this other version of Linux. And I'm thinking, well, the reason I approached it with kid gloves and careful comments is because I'm sensing that they don't really have the knowledge set to do those kind of things. So that particular person, from what I'm gathering by their writing, probably can handle a ready-made system that's Apple, a Mac, or a ready-made system that's Windows 10. And if they say have a budget of $1,000, they're probably going to be able to get better hardware if it's a Windows system than they will for a Mac system. So for $1,000, I don't even think you can get a new Mac system unless it's the MacBook Air. And that's cutting it really close, and there are limitations with the MacBook Air. But either way, that's my take on, why don't we just switch to this OS if we hate it so much? Well, you may find that what's on the other side of the fence, the grass isn't always greener, right? So just something to think about. I'd like to hear what your opinion is. I try to be careful again when I'm giving my opinion. I try to sense, the knowledge level of the user. Sometimes they provide that information for you. And what do you think? How do you approach people when they come to you and ask for your advice on what kind of computer they should have or operating system? And have you had the other side of the coin where you give them a recommendation and they end up hating it more than they did the previous system they had? And that's, again, I assume that their knowledge is more than they have, and maybe they get into a system that really they don't know how to use to its fullest extent, or the last operating system they had was Windows XP, so Windows 10 feels uncomfortable to them. Has that happened to you? I'd like to hear back from you. Thank you for watching, and again, thank you for the subscriptions, and I will see you on the next video.